The pounding at the door came between howls of the winter wind. 3 desperate knocks that pulled Nathaniel Hayes from his whiskey glass. He wasn't expecting visitors. Nobody came to his ranch in December unless death was chasing them. He opened the heavy oak door to find a small girl, maybe 9 years old, standing in ankle-deep snow. Her face was thin but determined, her coat threadbare against the Montana cold. Behind her eyes lived the kind of knowing no child should carry. "Can you take her instead of me?" the girl asked, pointing to the bottom of the steps where a smaller child huddled in blankets, nearly invisible against the gathering darkness. Nathaniel said nothing, studying them both as the wind threw the first flakes of a coming blizzard against his weathered face. "Our ma died birthing Sarah," the girl continued, words tumbling out. "Pa died in the mine collapse last month. Town council's splitting us up tomorrow. The widow Jenkins wants a maid, and the orphanage in Billings wants the little ones." Her voice cracked, but her gaze never wavered. "I can cook some and clean plenty. I don't eat much. She's all I got left." Nathaniel looked past her to the distant lights of Redemption Creek. The town he'd abandoned for solitude 5 years before. The same town that had whispered behind his back when he'd buried his failure alongside his wife and infant. "Son," he stood aside, wordlessly inviting them in. The girl hesitated, then gathered her sister, carrying her up the steps though she herself could barely stand. Inside, the fire's warmth brought color to their blue-tinged lips. As Nathaniel hung their threadbare coats by the fire, a folded paper fell from the older girl's pocket, a crude map marked with mining symbols. She snatched it back quickly, eyes meeting his in silent understanding they both had secrets to keep. "I'm Eliza," she said, helping her sister sit closer to the flames. "This is Sarah." Nathaniel nodded, pouring a cup of coffee and sliding it toward her across the rough-hewn table. "Hayes," he said, the only word he'd spoken. It was enough for now. Sarah reached for the breakfast bowl just beyond her grasp. Without comment, Nathaniel slid it closer, watching the small girl's grateful smile. 3 days had passed since the night he'd taken them in, the blizzard now howling like a living thing outside. "Sir, I can wash up after," Eliza insisted, though dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Sarah and I earn our keep." "Eat first," Nathaniel said. 5 years of solitude had made his voice a rust-choked thing. "Work later." He watched Eliza cut Sarah's food into careful bites, the practiced movements of someone forced to parent too young. Something moved in his chest, a feeling he'd thought long buried beneath Montana soil. A pounding at the door silenced them all. Nathaniel opened it to find Sheriff Mills, snow crusting his mustache, papers clutched in gloved hands. "Council wants those children returned, Hayes," Mills said, stomping his boots, "for proper placement with suitable families." Nathaniel stood in the doorway like a wall. "They're hired help with room and board. Frontier law's clear on that." Mills squinted, surprised by Nathaniel's knowledge. "You know nothing about raising children. Council's just looking out for their welfare." "That's so..." Nathaniel's voice was metal on stone. "Tell Parker his concern is noted and unwanted." "This isn't finished," Mills warned, retreating toward his horse. That night, Sarah's small body burned with fever, her whimpers calling for a mother long dead. Eliza paced, helpless fear in her eyes. "She was fine at supper," she said, voice tight with panic. Without a word, Nathaniel moved to the corner of his cabin, prying up a loose floorboard. From beneath it, he retrieved a leather bag, its brass clasps tarnished but intact. Inside lay medical instruments, herbs, and tinctures arranged with a physician's precision. His hands moved with practiced certainty as he examined Sarah, mixing a willow bark tincture for her fever. Eliza watched, eyes narrowing at this revelation. "You're a doctor," she said. Not a question, but an accusation. Nathaniel's silence was its own admission as he gently coaxed the bitter medicine into Sarah's mouth. Some identities couldn't stay buried, no matter how deep you dug the grave. Lamplight carved shadows across Nathaniel's weathered face as he applied cool cloths to Sarah's forehead. Outside, the blizzard had sealed them into a world of wind and whiteness. Eliza sat opposite, watching his every move with the intensity of someone memorizing survival. My father was a physician in Chicago. Nathaniel finally answered her unspoken questions. I followed him. Practiced 15 years. Why'd you stop? Eliza asked, handing him fresh cloths. His jaw tightened. Some things don't need telling. But at dawn, with Sarah's fever climbing and supplies dwindling, fragments of truth spilled between them. His wife Elizabeth, their son dying during birth. His surgeon's hands unable to save either one. Came west to forget, he said, voice barely audible above the howling wind. Some things follow. Sarah's breathing grew more labored. The medicines in Nathaniel's bag weren't enough. They needed the stronger remedies locked in the town apothecary. Storm's letting up, he said, pulling on his coat. Need to get to Stevenson's shop. Town's 4 miles in snow, Eliza protested. Been through worse. He checked his rifle, loading it with practiced hands before showing Eliza how to bar the door and use the weapon if needed. Why'd you take us both? Eliza asked as he prepared to leave. Could have just taken Sarah like I asked. Nathaniel paused at the door, snow whipping inside. Sometimes a man needs to remember who he was meant to be. He mounted his gelding, disappearing into the swirling white. Eliza barred the door behind him, wondering if she'd exchanged one abandonment for another. From the bed, Sarah whimpered, calling for people who would never answer again. Eliza stroked her sister's hair, whispering the promises adults had broken too many times. He'll be back. We'll be all right. She glanced at the hidden map, her father's last gift, and possibly his death sentence. Parker had wanted it badly enough to ensure her father's mining team was undermanned and dangerous that day. Now he wanted the girls, and Eliza knew it wasn't out of charity. She stared into the fire, wondering if she'd trusted the wrong man again. Eliza melted snow for water, counting their remaining supplies: half a loaf of bread, some beans, a bit of jerky. 3 days had passed with no sign of Nathaniel. The blizzard had finally broken, leaving an eerie stillness broken only by the occasional howl from the ridge. Is Dr. Hayes coming home today? Sarah asked, voice stronger though her cheeks remained flushed. Soon, Eliza promised, though doubt gnawed at her. She'd heard wolves circling closer each night, drawn by the cabin's scent and desperation. At dusk on the 4th day, Eliza was stoking the fire when gunshots cracked the silence. She grabbed Nathaniel's rifle and peered through frost-webbed windows. A dark shape lay in the snow 50 yards from the house. Stay inside. Bolt the door, she told Sarah, wrapping herself in Nathaniel's spare coat before venturing out. The cold bit through her clothes as she trudged through knee-deep snow. It was Nathaniel, collapsed and bleeding from his shoulder, his horse nowhere in sight. Beside him lay his saddlebag, clutched tight despite his injury. Told you I'd come back, he muttered through blue-tinged lips. You didn't actually say it, Eliza replied, the ghost of a smile appearing as she helped him rise. Inside, she cleaned his wound using techniques she'd watched him perform, her small hands steady. He'd fought off wolves after his horse had broken through river ice, then walked miles carrying medicine that might have cost him his life. Thought you weren't coming back, Eliza admitted, binding his shoulder. Hayes' men keep their word, Nathaniel winced. A tentative peace settled between them until a knock at the door shattered it. A message rider from town stood stamping against the cold, clutching an official-looking envelope. For Mr. Hayes, the boy said. Sheriff says it's important. Inside was a summons. Parker was challenging Nathaniel's claim to the girls, citing his unsuitability as guardian due to his reclusive nature and questionable past. The document requested Eliza and Sarah be interviewed about their father's final statements and possessions. Nathaniel's face hardened as he read between the lines. This isn't about your welfare, he said. It's about your father's claim. Parker cheated Pa, Eliza confirmed. Said the vein was played out, offered him pennies. Pa refused to sell. Then your Pa found something, Nathaniel concluded. Something worth killing for. Eliza's silence was answer enough. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration as Nathaniel guided her hand forming letters. January's thaw had brought mud and the first hint of easier days ahead. Like this, she asked, completing a wobbly S. Just right, Nathaniel said, his gentleness still surprising Eliza as she entered with firewood. In the weeks since his return, a tentative rhythm had formed between them. Nathaniel spoke more, teaching Sarah her letters while Eliza helped with ranch chores. At night, they'd sit by the fire as Sarah drew pictures of the three of them together, a family her imagination had, created from the wreckage of two broken ones. One evening, Eliza found Nathaniel alone on the porch, a small silver locket open in his weathered hands. Inside were miniature portraits of a woman with kind eyes and an infant wrapped in baptismal cloth. Elizabeth and Thomas, he said without looking up. She'd have liked you girls. You blame yourself, Eliza stated simply. His silence confirmed it. Later that night, their fragile peace nearly shattered when Sarah innocently asked if he was their new Pa. Nathaniel's face closed like a fist. You need proper family, he said gruffly. Someone who won't fail you. That's not for you to decide, Eliza challenged, her voice steady. We've had enough people deciding what we need. After Sarah slept, Eliza found Nathaniel staring into the fire. She removed the real map from her doll's stuffing, not the decoy Parker was seeking. Pa's last words were about this, she whispered, showing him markings indicating a gold vein on land adjacent to Parker's claims. Said it was our future. Now I don't know if it's our curse. That why Parker's after you. Your Pa's map, Nathaniel asked. Eliza nodded. He offered to buy us train tickets east if I gave it to him. Men like him don't stop. Nathaniel said, Gold fever's worse than any sickness I ever treated. Worse than what took your family? She asked softly. His silence was answer enough. We all got ghosts. Dr. Hayes, Eliza said, folding the map. Question is whether we let them bury us too. Sheriff Mills arrived with 2 deputies just after breakfast, legal papers clutched in his gloved hand. A small crowd of townspeople had gathered at a distance, watching the drama unfold. By order of Judge Wilson, the minor children Eliza and Sarah Callahan are remanded to the temporary custody of Mr. Everett Parker until the spring assizes, Mills read, avoiding Nathaniel's eyes. This is Parker's doing, Nathaniel said, anger hardening his voice. Using the law to steal what isn't his. It's done proper, Hayes, Mills insisted, though his discomfort was evident. You can make your case at the hearing. Nathaniel's hands formed fists as Eliza and Sarah were led to Parker's waiting carriage. The elaborate conveyance seemed to mock their threadbare clothes in the simple ranch they'd begun calling home. We'll be back, Eliza called over her shoulder, trying to sound braver than she felt. Parker's mansion stood like a fortress at the edge of town, its grand rooms cold despite roaring fires in marble fireplaces. The sisters were immediately separated, Sarah taken to a comfortable guest room. Eliza led to a Spartan attic chamber with a locked door. That evening, Parker visited Eliza's room, his silk waistcoat and gold watch chain gleaming in lamplight. Your father was a fool who didn't understand progress, he said, circling her like a hawk. But he wasn't stupid enough to die without telling someone where that vein was. Now, you'll tell me, or your sister stays across town with the widow Jenkins, permanently. I don't know anything about a vein, Eliza insisted, though fear clawed at her throat. Pa just worked his claim like the others. Parker's smile never reached his eyes. We'll see if a week apart from your sister improves your memory. After he left, the housekeeper, Mrs. Porter, brought a meager supper. Her kind eyes assessed Eliza's situation. Mr. Parker's power in this town isn't absolute, she whispered. There are those who remember what decency looks like. Can you get a message to Mr. Hayes? Eliza asked. Mrs. Porter nodded slightly. Eat your supper, child. Even prison walls have ears. From the window. Eliza could see the distant ranch where she'd finally felt safe. Now it stood empty. Its lone occupant somewhere in town. Perhaps unaware they'd been taken. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, wondering if Sarah was doing the same in her separate prison. Nathaniel sat alone in the corner of the Broken Spur saloon, an untouched whiskey before him and his doctor's bag on the table like an accusation. February's bitter winds rattled the windows as he stared at the amber liquid, seeing in it all his past failures. Thought you'd given up the bottle, said Jim Corrigan, sliding into the opposite chair. Once Nathaniel's friend, he now owned the town livery. Working on it, Nathaniel muttered, pushing the glass away. Heard about the girls. Jim continued. Parker's got half the town convinced you're unfit to care for them. Maybe I am. Self-loathing rose in Nathaniel's throat. Couldn't save my own family. Who am I to think I can save anyone? Later, staggering back toward his rented room, Nathaniel encountered Mrs. Porter. The housekeeper pressed a folded paper into his hand before hurrying away. Inside was a child's drawing 3 figures standing before a cabin with smoke curling from its chimney. Beneath it, in Eliza's careful hand, you said a man remembers who he's meant to be. Dawn found him kneeling before 2 simple graves at the edge of town. He removed his hat, the winter grass rustling around the markers of his wife and son. I couldn't save you, he whispered. That truth nearly killed me. Wind caught his words, carrying them across the silent cemetery. But those girls, they need saving too. And maybe that's why I'm still here. By afternoon, Nathaniel had visited the bank manager, the blacksmith, and 3 farmers who'd suffered under Parker's schemes. Each had pieces of a larger picture forged documents, stolen claims, rigged equipment that had caused deaths like Callahan's. At the ranch, he found his hands, Jim Corrigan, and 4 others waiting. Heard you might need help, Jim said simply. Nathaniel unfolded a map of Parker's mansion provided by Mrs. Porter. We're not just saving 2 girls, he told them. We're saving what's left of decency in this town. One by one, the men nodded. Not because they particularly cared about 2 orphans, but because each had felt Parker's boot on their neck in some way. Founders' Day celebrations tomorrow. The blacksmith noted, everyone will be there. Including Parker, Nathaniel said. And that's when we move. That night, he cleaned his medical instruments. Not for surgery, but for a different kind of healing, cutting out the disease that had infected their town. Eliza worked the hairpin against the attic door lock, using skills her father had taught her for opening stuck mining equipment. 3 turns and a gentle push, the lock clicked open. She slipped into the hallway, following the path to Sarah's room she'd memorized during her unchaperoned visit days earlier. Outside, Redemption Creek bustled with Founders' Day preparations. Banners hung from lampposts, and a band warmed up in the town square. The celebration would keep the house staff busy, giving her the chance she needed. Sarah's face lit up when Eliza slipped into her room. I knew you'd come. Quiet now, Eliza whispered, helping her sister dress. We're leaving. They crept down the service stairs and through the kitchen garden. Freedom waited just beyond the orchard fence, but so did Everett Parker, returning early from the celebration preparations. Running so soon? He asked, blocking their path. His genteel manner vanished, revealing the predator beneath. I expected more gratitude after opening my home to 2 orphans. He grabbed Sarah's arm, making her cry out, perhaps separating you permanently will improve your manners. Let her go. Nathaniel Hayes stood at the garden gate, his voice steady as a drawn gun. Parker's face twisted with contempt. This doesn't concern you. Doctor, the law's on my side. Law built on lies doesn't stand, Nathaniel said, walking forward. Around him gathered townspeople drawn by the commotion. Celebration forgotten. These children ain't property. Parker, Nathaniel's voice carried across the suddenly silent crowd. And neither was their father's claim you forged papers on, nor the widow's lands you've stolen, nor this town's dignity. One by one, witnesses stepped forward, the bank clerk with evidence of forged documents, miners who'd seen tampered equipment before Callahan's death, farmers whose land had been seized through suspicious debts. Parker's face paled, then flushed with rage. His hand moved to his coat where a derringer waited. You're nothing, Hayes. A drunk who couldn't save his own family. Playing at redemption. He drew the small pistol, but before he could aim, Nathaniel moved with the precision of a surgeon, disarming him without violence. Parker sprawled in the mud, his fine suit soiled like his reputation. Sheriff Mills stepped forward, reluctance warring with duty on his face. Mr. Parker, I'm placing you under arrest pending investigation. As Parker was led away, Eliza and Sarah ran to Nathaniel, who knelt to meet them. Over their heads, his eyes met the gathered townsfolk's, some shamed, some relieved, all witnessing the moment a town remembered its conscience. April sunlight streamed through freshly washed windows as Nathaniel mounted his old doctor's shingle beside the ranch house door. He measured twice, hammered once, surgeon's precision applied to a new beginning. Straight, he asked Eliza, who handed him nails from her apron pocket. Perfect, she confirmed, surveying the words Nathaniel Hayes, physician, inside. Sarah practiced her letters at the kitchen table, now writing full sentences in a careful hand. The official papers granting Nathaniel guardianship lay beside her, the town council's seal affixed where Parker's influence once would have prevented it. Mrs. Porter's bringing a cake, Sarah announced, for the celebration. Celebration. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Of us, Eliza explained. Being a family, properly now. That word still caught in Nathaniel's throat, family. A gift he thought forever lost to him, now growing around him like the spring wildflowers dotting the once frozen land. Later, they walked to the gentle rise behind the ranch, where two new wooden crosses stood alongside two weathered ones. Sarah placed fresh-picked flowers before each marker. For Ma and Pa, she said, setting blossoms by the newer crosses. Then, moving to the older ones, and for Elizabeth and Thomas. Nathaniel stood silent, his heart too full for words as Sarah continued. They're all watching over us, she declared with a child's certainty, like angels. As they stood together in the lengthening shadows, Eliza took Nathaniel's weathered hand in her small one. You didn't fail them, she said quietly. And you didn't fail us. Nathaniel squeezed her hand gently. Some roots grow deeper after the harshest winters, he said, watching wildflowers bloom around their memorial markers. Your pa's map might have shown gold, but he left you something more valuable. He looked at both girls. He left you each other, and somehow left you with me too. They walked back together as sunset painted the Montana sky in hues of promise. The ranch house stood transformed, smoke curled from the chimney. Lamplight warmed the windows, and the doctor's sign swung gently in the evening breeze. Near the doorway, a single purple wildflower pushed through soil where snow had once threatened to bury all hope of spring. Sarah stooped to touch its petals with gentle fingers. It's the strongest one. Nathaniel observed. The ones that survive winter always are. Eliza looked up at him, wisdom beyond her years in her steady gaze. Guess that makes us the strongest ones too. In silent agreement, they crossed the threshold together, not just into a house, but into a home they had built from broken pieces, proving that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the deepest wounds.